Greetings to everyone that is here listening to us. Greetings to our speakers. We're here and we're very happy to be hosting this webinar in these dark times. And right now, as we know, Israel has intensified its targeted killings of Palestinian journalists and begins its ground invasion of Gaza, hoping to shut down all the news coming out of the area about Gaza and about West Bank as well. Urgent action is needed internationally to widen the awareness of what the journalists have given their lives to report and to advocate for a stop to the genocide against the Palestinians of the West Bank and Gaza that is being waged by the state of Israel. Our panel will be an opportunity to hear from media artists, from social media creators, from journalists and students how they describe their current efforts and to join with them in an exchange of ideas around what media artists and social media creators can do now to make a difference. And first of all, I would like to welcome one of our speakers that is an example, I would say, of free speech and of advocacy of the journalist voices in Gaza, is Abubaker Abed, a very young, 22 years old. I don't know, sorry if I said your age. A journalist, a war correspondent from Dar al-Balah in Gaza, who began reporting during the ongoing genocide in his early 20s, as I said. Well, his dream was to become a sportscaster, but what he would like, he had a passion, and he still has, for football, but the situations changed his calling, and now documents the human toll of the genocide, focusing on the everyday struggles of Gazans and especially athletes. Welcome, Abubaker.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for the words. Really great to be here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
You can. You have the microphone.
Okay. Well,
yes,
I don't know what I have to speak on exactly, or speak about exactly, but there are a lot of things that have been really hard to absorb over the last 2 years, particularly when it comes to covering this genocide and when it comes to the impunity the Palestinian journalists have been facing for almost 2 years now. I think the first thing that I'd like to talk about is how journalists work in Gaza. And this starts with the fact that we have stats about journalists. We have nearly 300 journalists who have been killed by Israel during this genocide. We have over 500 who have been injured, and we have almost 1,500 journalists who have been displaced from their homes and who have been living in makeshift tinted places and in extremely horrific circumstances. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is that they face a lot of backlash from international media outlets and from Western governments and what Israel wants the world to believe in them. And this is in itself an incitement of violence, an incitement of death. And for Israel, they don't believe that there is a journalist in Gaza. They believe all of them are Hamas operatives. But the fact is, when we look at the Israeli journalists, and some of them have been embedded with Israel into Gaza, and they have been seen raiding and shooting at Palestinian houses, and this has been verified. On the contrary, on the other hand, there hasn't been a single case verified or reported independently on Palestinian journalists getting involved in whatever it is. And thirdly, we as Palestinian journalists, we're not only reporting, but we're also multitasking, which means that you also have a family to take care of. That says that you need to go and get food for your family. You need to fill water into your buckets, into your gallons of water. And you need to ensure that your family is fine. Sometimes you need to take them outside. Sometimes you need to bring them life necessities. Sometimes you take them to a hospital. And finally, you yourself is a threat, is seen as a threat because of what Israel has been claiming. And that means you can't, even you're a threat to your family. And that's what exactly transpired with me. Because for many weeks, my mother, my family have advised me and have literally pleaded for me to stop reporting. The same from many journalists across the globe who have told me that please, Abubaker, stop reporting, you're going to be a target. And that's why I left Gaza, because in the end, there were media smear campaigns against me. I saw death incitements many times. And then I had to take this horrible decision, very agonizing decision, to leave Gaza. So this is the first thing about journalists. And in the meantime, by the way, they are facing a campaign of dehumanization by international media, particularly Western media outlets, that we're working under Hamas duress. And I can tell you from here that it never happened with me for one single time that Hamas came to tell me what to report on or what to say. It never happened at all. And in the end, to clarify this, Hamas is the government, okay? So the fact that anybody works in the government, it doesn't mean he works in Hamas. There's no problem in that. It's a government that runs Gaza. You know what I mean? So there's nothing about it at all. You would see Palestinian journalists reporting every single day, 24/7, okay? And they are doing everything in their power to report the truth. And then you would see some people claiming that they are terrorists or whatever. I don't know what the meaning of terrorism is. I've never seen someone saying that defending your own homeland is terrorism. Like, I've never seen this definition before. But I think this is a result of colonization of minds that has been ongoing for many, many years. We've been deceived by the Western values and set of laws that, well, terrorism is defending your own homeland and self-defense is genocide. Self-defense is committing a Holocaust in Gaza, killing 70,000 people and injuring 120,000 people. And then there are certain things that you can't report. If you go to a particular place, a lot of journalists have been killed. They go to a particular place after the first bomb, and then once Israel, because Israel oversees the entire Gaza Strip, and once Israel sees that these journalists have approached this particular place, then the place is bombed. And this is what has happened with the 5 journalists who were killed in Nasser Hospital. That's why I was always keen to avoid such stories to report on, because I know Israel is going to run after them. And again, it never, for all people, for all journalists in Gaza, they never felt. I know a lot of journalists who would report without a press vest because it's meaningless, it's useless. And another fact, no committee, even the Committee to Protect Journalists, I'm not sure if you are all aware of this, but last time they announced the awardees for this year's ceremony, not a single Palestinian journalist among them. And they said that, we did something for Palestine last year. So it's very selective. It's very selective rewards. It's very selective humanity that I can't really understand and wrap my head around. So people would see us as, people who want to distort the truth or whatever. And we said to people from the start of this genocide that was a genocide. but no one believed us. They wanted the UN to investigate it. They wanted Western people to investigate it. So we can send someone from the West, or a European man or a white man, to go to Gaza and tell us it's a genocide, then we will. We will believe them. But other than that, Palestinians have been telling you that this is a genocide from the start of it. You never believed us. And that's one of the problems, and I hate it. This is dehumanization. This is racism. This is white supremacism. This is why this genocide has been ongoing for a very long time. Because if Western media and those Western politicians believed what Palestinians said, and they were a little bit neutral, a little bit impartial or objective, this genocide wouldn't have spanned that long, wouldn't have spanned that long at all. But this is a result of what we've been deceived by for many, many, many years. And another thing about journalism in Gaza, this is not even, I wouldn't call it even journalism, because you are living it. You're not someone who's come from outside and in Gaza now, and you're reporting it. No, you're living it. I have myself have lost so many members of my extended family. My cousin, she was 45 years old, 6 children, and she was a mother. She was killed, her husband was killed, and her 6 children were killed. And I had to go live on TV saying, well, I am mourning the loss of my, or the deaths of my entire cousin's family. The same that happened with my aunt's family which was wiped out. The same that happened with my cousin whose son was killed with him. And I had to see, and I just did the live report, went to the graveyard, prayed, did the funeral, we buried him, and then I had to go back for another report. So look at the scale of suffering that we're going through as Palestinian journalists, just to report it, to say that, well, this is what we are documenting. So we are genocide documenters. I don't think even journalists, because journalists would have privileges. They would have special circumstances to work under. However, no one has been listening to us. I remember very vividly when I did that conference back in January 2025, and it went viral, but it didn't yet. I don't care if it went viral or not, but but in the end, when I did that conference and they said, well, this is what we're going through because we were not white, we're not Europeans, because this is racism, because we've been failed. Nothing has actually changed. Nothing has actually changed. Well, I believe Western media, even if Gaza's wiped out the other day entirely, and Gaza's nuked and no one stays in Gaza, Western media will still have a way to justify it. They will still have a way to say that what happened was something that could be justified. And that's why you're still having this genocide. The people are great. The people are doing great things. The governments, the politicians, and the Western media and the media outlets are run by, I don't know, are run by whom, but it seems to me they are on a Zionist payroll to obey or serve certain agendas and to manufacture consent for the Israelis to go ahead with this ongoing genocide. And that is a red line. Why should I be killed? And you know why I didn't stay? Because I knew no one would protect me. Whomever I pleaded for or implored for at that time, no one would even think about helping me survive or whatever, because they don't care about Palestinians. I doubt the fact that those Western politicians and media outlets, they see us as equal human beings. I doubt it. I completely doubt it. And I don't think they think so. No, they think Palestinians should be mass murdered. They think Palestinians should be genocided. Look, today, it took them a genocide to recognize the Palestinian state, which was very symbolic, very performative. We're not seeing anything in the ground. If you're looking at the recognition of Palestine, that doesn't mean the end, first and foremost, of the genocide. Then what are we doing? Look at the presidents of the countries of the world. They are sitting with Israeli journalists, listening from them, listening to their propaganda, like President Emmanuel Macron, but they would never invite a Palestinian journalist to listen to him. That itself also is a dehumanization, and we have to acknowledge it because it has to stop. Why Western media outlets, when they commission people in Gaza or journalists in Gaza, they They postpone the payments. They sometimes don't pay them. They deliberately discredit them and dishonor them. Why do you think this has happened? It has nothing to do with Hamas, by the way. And again, Hamas is a government. That's normal. It's a democratically elected government. So if people are in Hamas government, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not gonna kill people who are working now in the American government, which is a Republican government. I'm not gonna kill people who are working for this government. I'm not going to kill doctors who are working for this government, teachers who are working for this government. No, that doesn't make any sense to me. If you have proof of what you are claiming and what you are lying about, then present it. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen at all. So journalism in Gaza, finally, is genocide documentation in which you are a victim. Every story might be the end. Every story may be the last one. And that's what I always felt. Every time I went outside to report in something, my mother and my parents would say, well, we know this could be the end. We know you might not come back. We know that our hearts are with you, but we don't know what will happen with you. We're just praying for you. They know everything. They know this reality. And the fact that this has been imposed on us, this horror has been forced upon us to feel that what we are doing, the duties that we are performing for the sake of our homeland, have become risks, real risks, and have become something under terrorism is absolutely appalling. And this lies, the responsibility beyond it is or lies on the shoulders of the West and of the world that has allowed it to happen. And thank you.
Dear Abubaker, first of all, our condolences for the loss, all the loss of your family, due to what exactly you said, this appalling attack of people that don't know anything about Palestine, don't know anything about Gaza, to the people that defend their land. You were clear, you were loud, you were full of indignation. You express all our indignation of all of us, because the people in the world, in this world, is with Palestine. But the government is a different matter. And this is where we should put pressure to. You spoke about racism, you spoke about dehumanization. And here we are in 2025, thinking that these words and these notions have disappeared. We have erased them. But no, we haven't. And it happens in real time. And it happens in real time, and we see it because of you, because of the journalists, that they mourn the loss of their people. And then they go to work to give us the truth. And this is more than heroic. This is beyond human nature, really. Thank you for all your whatever you do, really, because I'm very emotional right now, thinking the situation you're going through and what we're seeing for 700 days and more right now of massive scale genocide, industrial size genocide. I hope everything goes well with you. We are here to speak the truth. We're here with all of us, and especially through culture, through art, since we're all in this panel in some way or another related to some sort of a cultural sector. Our voices will be loud, and nobody will stop us, and we are with you. And at some point soon, we hope and will strive for free Palestine.
Thank you so much. And I hope you continue what you're doing, and it's really important.
Thank you very much, Abubaker. Such a young person.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's been an honor to be with you.
This is the Olive Press live conference in collaboration with the Good Soup Media and the Press Project in Athens that we are seeing as live. And now we're going to move to our next speaker, and I'm seriously very honored to be with speakers of such high caliber. And this is Erin Axelman. Erin is a queer filmmaker and a producer. As I said, we're all part of the cultural sector, who produced campaign videos for Jamal Bowen, the Sunrise Movement, and many other progressive organizations and candidates. Erin also is the director of the feature-length documentary that we all have seen and we all know and we all admire, Israelism, on the changing nature of the American-Jewish relationship to Israel, featuring Simone Zimmerman, Cornel West, Noam Chomsky, and many others. Erin, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you all for being here, and it was really incredible to hear from Abubaker. And just thank you all so much for all what you're doing, in this time of horrible genocide and crimes against humanity. As you mentioned, I'm the co-director and producer of the documentary Israelism, which is about both the ways in which many American Jews, including myself, feel like we were indoctrinated and given a completely one-sided story about Israel and its treatment of the Palestinians, and were kind of led to believe through the narratives that many of us grew up with, that Israel was this kind of beacon on the hill, the only democracy in the Middle East, this incredible place where Jews could finally find safety after the horrors that we experienced in Europe. But sadly, that is not an accurate story, right? Our trauma has been listened to, the Jewish trauma has been listened to, but our trauma has been used as a way to further traumatize Palestinians. And Palestinians have been the ones that have suffered for the crimes of Europe. Instead of Europe creating a safe place for Jews to live and atoning for the horrors of the Holocaust and centuries of anti-Semitism, they exported the problem to the Middle East, and Palestinians were the ones who had to deal with the horrors of European anti-Semitism and had to deal with the colonial project that became Israel, that never considered Palestinians equal human beings or thought of their rights to that land as equal or valid, even though they were literally living there, and only saw Jewish rights to that land as valid and as deserving of humanity. And I think, as a Jewish person who has been seeing a live stream genocide for almost 2 years now, I often think about the Holocaust and what I would have wanted people to do during the Holocaust, especially if we'd had access to social media and other forms of media to fully understand what was going on and the entirety and the scale of the Holocaust. And I think, growing up as a young person, as a kid, it was very difficult to process the Holocaust as a Jewish person and to think about what it would have been like for me to have faced such genocidal madness and genocidal violence, and also to think about why the world didn't speak up and why the world let millions of Jewish people die and face horrific oppression and be burned for 5 years, where the Holocaust went on for 5 years, and the precursors to the Holocaust and the patterns of nationalism and violence obviously were happening well before that in Germany. And anti-Semitism was a European problem. Many of my members of my family used to joke about that. If you'd asked in 1920 what European country was going to commit a genocide against the Jews, Germany would have been in the top 3. But it probably wouldn't have been even number 1. There was a number of countries and societies in Europe that had institutionalized anti-Semitism and had created many of their core beliefs around the inferiority and inhumanness of Jews. And again, all of that, and all of that history is difficult, I think, for many young people to wrap their heads around and to try to fully understand. And again, it makes it, being a Jewish person a complex thing because we have dealt with such a horrific genocide. But I think, at least as a Jewish person, our trauma is believed, right? People generally, obviously, there are some people who deny the Holocaust, but generally, people believe our trauma, right? People believe the Holocaust happened. People believe that anti-Semitism and hatred towards Jews was a centuries-long pattern in European society. And our trauma is validated, right? The number of films I've seen on the Holocaust, I've seen so many films in the Holocaust. I've seen so many TV series in the Holocaust. I've seen so many pieces of media about our suffering. And that's a good thing, right? I'm glad that our suffering has been validated and has had so much coverage. But I think what is so insane is the way in that our trauma has been believed and validated at the same time that Palestinian trauma has never been validated, has never been believed. I often think about the fact that, just a few years, my father was born in 1947 in the US. Our family very luckily got out of Eastern Europe in the early 1900s, and he was born right after the Holocaust finished and right as the Nakba began. He was born literally right when the Nakba was starting. And I often think about, how many films and books and TV series I've processed about the Holocaust. And up until 1 or 2 years ago, I never saw a film on the Nakba in my entire life. I didn't hear about the Nakba until my early to mid 20s. And I often think about, the gravity of understanding the Holocaust is so heavy, and that's with people accepting that it existed, right? I often think about how difficult and how horrific it would be to be a Jewish person if not only the Holocaust had happened, but it was denied by the entire world. How angry would I feel? How much furor and terror would I feel if not only we had gone through such a horrific thing, but it was just thrown aside by the world, if it wasn't believed? And when I talk with every Palestinian friend virtually I've ever had, all of them, their families have experienced the Nakba and experienced such horror and have been ethnically cleansed from their homes. And much of the world has no idea it even happened. And when some people even know it happened, they say it's propaganda. Just, fled. That was what it was. And, no big deal, essentially. And I try to think about how angry I would be if the core historical trauma of my people wasn't even believed, if it wasn't even considered. I think what is so insane about how Palestine has been treated in the Western world and the international community, all the major traumas the Palestinian people have gone through are thrown aside, are tossed aside, are delegitimized by the international community, even despite the fact that they're all out in the open. Right? All of this has happened with cameras, with video material. We've seen it happen. Obviously, the Nakba, when 750,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed. Again, most people in Israel deny that it even happened. And much of the international community either denies that it happened or refuses to create justice for the Nakba, to demand the right of those refugees who were kicked out of their homes. After the Nakba, obviously, in 1967, when Israel took over the rest of Palestine, and actually, it was my cousin by marriage, is Levi Eshkol, the Prime Minister of Israel, who began the occupation, not by blood, but my family spent quite a bit of time with him in the late 1960s, and he was the one who began the occupation. And since that occupation began, Israel has been very literally an apartheid state, right? A state that controls people of different races and categorizes those people into different legal systems because of their race. And despite the fact that Israel has been a literal apartheid state for well over half a century, the great majority of the world does not recognize Israeli apartheid, despite the fact that literally it has been out in the open for decades and decades and decades and decades. The great majority of Western world leaders still refuse to call it apartheid, and sometimes make, kind of milquetoast claims about the occupation or settlements, but refuse to name it as it is, which is very basically an apartheid state, right? Any system, any government that creates a two-tiered legal system based on race is obviously an apartheid state. But despite the fact that this horrific crime of apartheid has been forced upon the Palestinians for over half a century, right? That trauma too has not been recognized or allowed to come into the international consciousness. And lastly, in these past 2 years, after the Nakba, after over 50 years of literal apartheid, we have actually seen the first live stream genocide, in which from the very first days after October 7th, and again, I know people who were murdered on October 7th, I know people whose parents were killed on October 7th. From the day after October 7th, when Galant and key Israeli ministers began referring to people in Gaza as animals, and created a siege, a military siege, which cut off all electricity, water, and food. It has been clear that the intent of this operation was a genocidal intent. And then since then, as they've actually destroyed so much of Gaza and killed, at least 70,000 people, potentially much, much more, it has been clear that the actions have matched the intention and that this is very clearly a genocide that's been playing out on our phones for so long. Yet despite the fact that this genocide has literally been on our phones, I've seen so many horrific images of babies with their arms blown off, with their faces blown off. I can't even, I can't even comprehend how many images I've seen of dismembered and disfigured bodies lying on the ground of Gaza. Despite this, and despite the fact that basically every human rights organization in the world, as well as even Israeli human rights groups like B'Tselem, have called it a genocide, key Western leaders especially still either fully support the genocide, are literally complicit in it, or deny its existence, or some combination of both. Again, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, who ironically had an earlier career as a human rights lawyer, just last week, again, right after the UN said that it is a genocide, denied that it is a genocide, as they still provide weapons to Israel for this genocide, and as he had a kind of chummy pal press conference with Donald Trump, and essentially bought into Donald Trump's vision for what Palestine could look like. And I try to think about, how angry I was as a child learning about the Holocaust, learning about the fact that this was allowed to happen, that people like myself were burned alive and killed in the hundreds of thousands and the millions. How angry I was realizing that, and how, horrified I was realizing that not only did my distant relatives die, but also, if my family just hadn't left when they did, that all my family would have been dead, and I would have been dead or never existed as well. But at least knowing that I wasn't crazy, at least knowing that people believed me, at least gave me something. And to be experiencing this so openly and so obviously, and for world leaders to still not recognize it and still not come to terms with it, is, I think, one of the greatest crimes of world history. To see this genocide so openly and to have the gall to deny its existence is gaslighting of a truly epic scale. And I truly hope that the people who are complicit in this genocide, or the people who have known it's a genocide, but have failed to acknowledge what it is, I hope they can never sleep. I hope they never find peace, because again, if people had treated the Holocaust that way and didn't acknowledge the Holocaust, we would rightly call them Holocaust deniers. We would call them genocide deniers. We would call them all these horrible things that they are. But when people deny the genocide in Gaza, they're allowed to just exist without any real consequences. And I think what's so incredible about Abubaker and others is that there's been so many journalists who have paid the ultimate price so that we could see this, so that it would not be silenced. Israel obviously does not let in any international journalists to Gaza. And so because of that, the only people who have been able to share this genocide to the international community have been the people of Gaza themselves, both journalists and regular people. And the world is in debt to them for showing us that this type of horror can still exist in the 21st century and has existed. And I'm so grateful for people who have risked their safety, who have risked their lives, who have died, just to show the rest of the world that this is happening, that this is a real thing. And I truly hope that in generations to come, these people will be lauded and seen as the heroes that they are, just like those who risked their lives to document the Holocaust and to document the crimes against Jewish people in Europe. and are now seen as heroes for doing so. I truly hope that the journalists who have risked everything to document this will be seen as the heroes they are. And in the U.S. and in the rest of the world, I hope that all of us can just do whatever part we can to help raise awareness of the genocide and of Palestinian stories in general. If I was living during the Holocaust, I would hope that my peers would spread the word about what was happening to Jewish people. And because I live in the time of this genocide, I really hope that all of us do whatever we can to help spread the word about the history of Palestine and the genocide that we see in Palestine right now. And thank you all so much again, both who are here on the Zoom as well as the people who are watching on YouTube live. And thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, dear Erin. It's so important, these words coming from you as a Jewish person that knows exactly how it is from all the history behind the Holocaust during the Nazi occupation, to be able to recognize how it is to be living in a Holocaust times, in a genocide times, and you be able to express your ideas freely, openly against this new genocide that we're experiencing, which has, as you said, the same roots. The roots is the same pattern of nationalism, of violence, of colonialism, and of thinking of people as non-people, of thinking of a land without people, like a terra nullius. And exactly what you said, the people should come out, should speak about it, and should give light the way you do it by your work in the documentary industry, to be able to shed light on this genocide that we run right now on the 78th year of it, since the Nakba, as you said, of 1948. So thank you very much, and we'll have you in our discussion later by questions by our audience. Now we're moving to another young and very precious person, which is Jack Starobin. Am I right? Starobin. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in just now, 2024, and he was a student organizer for the Jewish community group Penn Chavurah. The Chavurah was founded in 2021 as a space for Jewish students to build community outside of Hillel, and in part to refuse Hillel's international Israel guidelines, which censor criticism of Israel. So that you're a young revolutionary. Jack is currently a pre-doctoral research fellow at Yale Center for the Study of American Politics, and he studies the Democratic Party's evolution in a changing American political economy. Let's hear from you, Jack.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here with all of you at a really harrowing time. I think it's hard to find the words to meet the moment. I'm going to do my best. I want to talk about power in the context specifically of students on college campuses, and I think more broadly as I think about what the role is for voices in the media in the United States and around the world. We've heard from Abubaker and Erin about, I think, one aspect of this genocide which is so traumatic, which is the devastating indifference of people and governments in the United States and around the world to something that is so visible to us, that we carry in our pockets and it animates our social media feeds every day for the past 2 years. And so there's this question of how could you not believe what you see with your own eyes, what is being live streamed in ways that technology has enabled that was not possible in the Holocaust, and yet it seems like the genocide is happening anyway, right? So I think it's easy in this moment to feel despair and to feel disempowered, and especially as Trump's authoritarianism rises in the U.S. It's easy. I know I'm not the only young person that feels that struggles with despair sometimes, but I want to respond to the concern that the world at large does not believe their eyes. I think that's a huge part of what's been going on. But I also think we should say how fragile some of the systems of power that enable the genocide are. I think it's important to remember that one of the things that Netanyahu and Trump and the other collaborators and enablers of this genocide, one of the things that they fear the most is that the stories of Palestinians are told and are heard around the world. I think it's important to remember the lengths that the US government, for example, goes to silence these stories, to put pressure on universities across the country, not to allow students to speak about or to mourn the lives lost in Gaza. The reason why the Israeli government targets journalists, or the reason why the United States goes to such lengths to silence this kind of speech, is because they know that if people heard, if people knew, if the people had to sit with the fact that what is being lost in Gaza is human beings with lives and families and loved ones and homes and traditions, that you would not want it done in your name. Right. And sometimes that can ring a bit idealistic, but I think that there is a real element of truth to it, because I think that there's been so much work to prevent those stories from being told and should try to contain information to the timeline, which obviously should be powerful enough. But it's striking how much this seems to be an empire built on fear. And so, I think what's our responsibility? What's my responsibility? I met Erin in the context of screening their documentary film Israelism at my college campus. My college campus, the University of Pennsylvania, tried to censor this film screening shortly after October 7th, largely capitulating to the pressure of mega donors and far-right congressional Republicans to censor free speech on college campuses, specifically calling out Israel for the crime of apartheid and the genocide that was unfolding even in its early months. So that's the context where I met Erin, and I think that in some ways it's become harder to mobilize on college campuses, but it's also, because of that, become much more important to continue speaking up and using those platforms, especially for people at high profile universities like Yale or the University of Pennsylvania or wherever, many schools across the country. It's critical that we continue forcing the conversation, because so much of, I think, what the political strategy is of the Israeli government or the US government is hoping that people forget about it, they push it to the back of their minds, and that they're not forced to confront the fact that people are continuing to live the genocide that we've seen unfolding. And so, I also want to speak to the fact that, when we talk about forcing the conversation, specifically for students on college campuses, it's hard to remain in a grounded place of action, I think, at a moment when it's easy to feel despair, when it's a timeline that scrolls and it's endless. On social media, the work of journalists on social media is critical. It's an important platform to get the word out. And at the same time, I think one of the most important things that students can do is to create community groups that break out of the monotony of the timeline and build relationships where people have to actually sit with the emotional force of what it means to know someone in your life who maybe puts something on the line or risks putting their face on a truck and getting doxxed, speaking up for Palestinian lives, who foregrounds Palestinian voices in the events and the conversations that they themselves are hosting. We need people to build those relationships that break out of the monotony of the timeline. I think that's really important work, and it's work that students on college campuses are well equipped for, because those are spaces where we have the opportunity to build community with people in ways that I think, the routine of professional life, having, I graduated a year ago, and I think the routine of professional life, it poses different challenges there. So I think those are my comments at the moment. I'm happy to speak more about my experience on campus if that's relevant in the Q&A, but I think we're really indebted to journalists like Abubaker and many others who risk their lives or have given their lives to tell the truth right now. And I'm very grateful to be speaking and organizing with all of you.
Thank you, Jack. Your words were also very powerful, especially when it comes to out of the places of knowledge, the colleges, universities, and how important these places are as they build communities, as they spread the truth and the knowledge. And we should definitely let these places free and not be handled by governments and places of power. And as you said, genocide is always with us. It's in our phones. We see it every day. No matter how they try to hide, it's impossible to hide it. It's there and it's in real time and it keeps continuing. So, as you said, it's easy to feel disheartened, grounded, not be able to thinking that we'll not be able to do anything. But even that, even what we're doing today and raising our voices constantly, it is a step towards awakening. So what you do is very, very important. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. And let's move now to our next speaker, which is Richard Leeds. Richard, he's, well, in Greece, we know very well Richard because he's got some Greek roots, let's say. He's a New York filmmaker, media artist, and writer. His most recent films include V13, a fiction film with Alan Cumming in the role of Sigmund Freud about the rise of the Nazi Germany in Vienna before World War I. Also, Iconophile Z, a light romantic comedy about the extinction of all life on Earth. And Adieu Lacan, a fiction film about psychoanalysis conducted by Jacques Lacan, played by David Patrick Kelly. His earlier films include No Human is Illegal, an amazing, I would say, documentary about undocumented migrants held on the Greek island of Lesbos. He also writes his newsletter that can be subscribed through his website, richardleeds.com. Here to you, Leeds.
Thank you, Faye, for that introduction and for reminding me about my mic. I want to thank my co-panelists for being here with me today. I think it's an example for all of us, for those of us joining us, that we all have to do what we can. I mean, that would be, I think, the most important message to take away from today. It's a message that recently I've heard echoed by Francesca Albanese and others, that the most important thing is that we find some way of acting. In terms of who media artists are, anyone listening or watching this is potentially a media artist. All you really need is access to the internet at this point. Of course, free speech does not mean free reach. The ability to put something online, you can be limited in terms of its dissemination. But there are other ripple effects that create buzz, that create community around any action. So, and the other question I would ask is, when is now? And now is a moment when the support internationally of any kind for Israel's actions of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid are crumbling, are fragmenting. They're fragmenting in the United States, which obviously plays a key role in Israel's ability to carry these actions out. And so every action is very important. Since we're talking about social media, the piece we created for this, Alexandros Kadoros, who created the small video that announced today's event has music which is an oud playing, and that music was taken from my film Adieu Lacan, which is about a woman whose family journeys from Lebanon or immigrates from Lebanon to Brazil, and there she then makes her way to Paris, where she does an analysis with Lacan. And her main complaint is she can't she's having trouble giving birth. And one of the things that fascinated me was that, in fact, Lacan was very interested in this way that Socrates said he knew nothing, he could only help someone give birth to the truth. His role was only as a midwife, as maïudix, and that Lacan thought of this as what psychoanalysis was, that people would come and ask for an answer, and his feeling was that, well, you have the answer within you. You really, all I can do is help you bring it out. And I feel, we have to collectively give birth to the end of this horror that is being visited upon the Palestinian people. It's really, and I'm speaking to the audience as well, that we need each of us to do what we can. There's an Aesop's fable, which is about a fox and a hedgehog. Sometimes it's described as the fox and a cat, but I'm allergic to cats. If Lamprini told this story, it'd probably be the fox and the cat. But anyway, the fox, the hedgehog asks the fox, what can you do? And the fox says, oh, I can climb up a tree, I can play dead, I can cross a stream. And how about you? And the hedgehog goes, all I can do is climb up a tree. That's all I can do. And then the dogs come, and the hedgehog climbs up the tree. And the fox is there trying to figure out what to do, and of course is killed by the dogs. And I think my friend Renato Tzanetoulakou, the sociologist, the writer, has written about the tyranny of choice. There's 5 kinds of kombucha, but the real choice is a choice that we're forced to make, in a way that's the real act of freedom. And I think we all have to make the choice to support the bringing about peace, just peace, and the end to the genocide and ethnic cleansing. Regarding my film V13, again, it's about the rise of the Nazi Weltanschauung, the Nazi worldview in Vienna before World War I. And, I think Freud is a very important figure at this time. He helps us to remind us, I think, for one thing, is how radically different Judaism is from this Western colonial concept, which is Zionism, and which has a kind of nationalism that was shared by the kind of European powers at the end of the 19th century gave birth to. The last thing, Freud died in 1939, which is before the genocide took its full form. And the last thing in his collected works, the 23 volumes, the extraordinary amount of work that Freud did, the very last thing is a short essay where he writes about being asked to speak about anti-Semitism. And he defers. He says, I'd rather people who were not Jewish, someone who is not Jewish, talk about anti-Semitism. And, I think at that time, he was calling for, by doing so, international solidarity. He was about to die, and I think about the AIDS dilemma, crisis, and that silence equals death. And in a way to reverse that his own death would not result in silence, but would be a call to speak. And that speech did not arise around the Holocaust, but it calls upon us to speak now, to stop this genocide. I think that's what we have to be called to do, and we can't overthink it. We need to do what each of us can do, and to be inventive about that. Jack's talked about to break the monotony of the timeline, and it reminds me of one moment where I saw Godard on French television, and he was part of a TV news report, and they had like 2 minutes about Vietnam, and they had 2 minutes about a clown show, and then they had Godard, and Godard said, "Hold on, replay what you just did." And when they after the clown had ended and the part on Vietnam started, he continued to narrate about the clown. And his point was that they were kind of compartmentalizing, that you had that you needed just to spend that time, that you couldn't linger, that you didn't think about, that you didn't let sink in what was actually happening. And I think it's very important that people take time, that we figure out strategies as artists to overcome strategies of denial, strategies of disavowal, where people know something, but yet they know it, but they don't know it. And so I think as artists, to use our abilities as artists to find ways to overcome this dominant narratives which create both denial and create disavowal. That's something we can do so that people cannot just go around. I mean, one of the great films made about the period of the Holocaust is The Sorrow and the Pity by Marcel Ophuls, which kind of goes back and looks at how while French after the war had narrated that they were deeply involved in fighting the Nazis, that in fact they were just going, in most cases there was the resistance, but in most cases they were just going about business as usual. And I think that's what we have to disrupt now, that it is absolutely unacceptable to anyone who knows their history. And I think it's not by a chance that they should be forbidding us to speak about the Holocaust in connection to what's been going on, because I think primarily we need to listen to people like Abubaker who are there and join their voices, I think, with the reflective thinking of people like Hannah Arendt and Primo Levi, these great Jewish thinkers who experienced the Holocaust, and I think really radically disrupt the idea that it can be used as a defense of the actions of Israel, and on the contrary, have to be used as a call to doing what we can to end what Israel is carrying out at this time. I'll turn it over now to Lamprini.
Thank you, Richard. Your last words about the Holocaust not being used as a defense, really technique, but as a call of action, I think is very, very important. And as you said, we're all somehow media artists, so we all have some access to media. We all know the information. That's why it's beautiful the way you mentioned that we need to give birth to the end of horror by our access to information. It's beautiful that you mentioned scenes from different movies of yours and others. the only really choice is to bring the end of genocide. As you said, there's no many choices. There's only one choice, but there are many choices in being inventive about it. So we can invent different ways of doing that. And since you mentioned Godard, I always remember him in front of, in Paris, of all the demonstration, being there with his camera, taking part to the demonstration of that beautiful May. Great, let's now move over to Lamprini. Well, Lamprini is a Greek journalist with an extensive, a massive amount of experience, about 36 years in covering the Middle East, isn't it, Lamprini? And she's been also the committee member of the Greek Journal for Palestine Union, isn't it? And also Lamprini, she's working as an international correspondent since 1991. She has covered the wars and civil wars in former Yugoslavia, Georgia, Nagorno-Karabakh, Liberia, and has reported from Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Chile, Egypt, Spain, and Britain in times of crisis, a massive experience. She is a member of EFJ and IFJ, and she now works at the Greek independent news portal, The Press Project, hosting us. Yes, Lamprini.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you all. I'm really moved, I have to say that. And not only from Abubaker, but of the beauty of Abubaker, followed by two Jewish young people. This is the beauty of humanity. Thank you for that, first of all. Second, the youngest journalist that I saw feed from in Gaza was 12 years old. There were people in social media who were sending us the truth of what happening there, who were kids who maybe the next day were dead, but they were showing us what's happening. They were sending us pictures. They were sending us the passion that they live. They were sending us the crucifixion of a whole people. That's what we experienced there. I'm talking as a Christian, I know, but I think that we all share the images of that. One of the things that I remember very well is the death of Samir Abubaker. He was 45 years old. It was December of 2023. And he was reporting from a school bombed by Israel, along with a hero colleague of his, Wael Dahdouh. We all know him probably. His family left then to Egypt because they were scared they will be all killed. Why I'm referring to this when we have so many of us being killed there, because while they were on site, they were targeted and attacked. Wael was injured, and Samer was injured too, but more severely. He was left there for 5 hours bleeding because the Israeli army wasn't allowing the ambulances to go and pick him up. He has bled to death. That is targeting, and that is crime. There's no other words to talk about how they died. Some of our colleagues were burned alive. We saw them targeted with and getting out of the tents, burning alive. I think that we all are right now traumatized. I can talk about myself. This is trauma for 2 years now. And this is not only to us. Israel has banned international press from Gaza. Before the genocide started, they have bombarded the AP and Al Jazeera offices in Gaza. And now there's about 120 news outlets that were bombarded and have no offices. Our colleagues there are working in conditions, as Abubaker said, they're displaced, they're malnourished, they're homeless, a lot of them. They have buried their families, their kids, and they continue. They continue. And new ones are born every day. And they're not only those. We have to talk about the Yemeni journalist, the newspaper that they hit last week. We had 31 dead. We can talk about the imprisoned journalists. The first one was in Jordan 2 months after the start of the genocide. She was imprisoned because she was critical to the policy of the government of Jordan. There are others in Morocco that are in prison. In Britain, they took off the media from people. We have in Europe facing a very bad case of censorship on this subject, as Abubaker said. So there's two kinds of heroes, let's say. The heroes there, the newborn journalists, the citizen journalists, the people who keep us continuing giving us what's happening there, and the people outside of there, the independent media, the people who are trying to tell what is happening. The last 3 months, I have to be honest, there's something changing in legacy media too, which is important. But we didn't have only to bring out the truth, and especially the people from Gaza, we didn't only have to face the censorship, we also had to face the platforms. We had to face platforms, the internet platforms that are complicit to the crime. We're learning about millions given to Google or to other platforms just to keep the news about Gaza down and keep the Israeli Hasbara up. We're seeing, see my Greek come up when I moved, but we're seeing things that have to do with this very modern genocide. That's something that Richard taught me, and it's a very good thing that he brought up for me when we were discussing the genocide, and we're discussing about it a lot, that this is a high-tech genocide, robots and drones and, and platforms and internet and the information that has to be suppressed. That's where we live. That's what we do. You all remember the leaked New York Times Gaza memo telling journalists that they have to avoid the word genocide, ethnic cleansing, and occupied territory. This is United Nations, right? Occupied territory is something recognized. No, you cannot say that. You cannot say that. So what we have in Gaza is the blood of a people and the blood of journalists given the word, the truth. It is something that sometimes we don't realize, and it's something that all that blood is so much that maybe 200 or 300 journalists are not a lot, but it's killing the witness. This is the important thing. They're killing the witness. They don't allow, that's why they're killing the doctors and the nurses too, because they're the witnesses, number two after the journalists. Another thing is, and I have to comment that Israel has good press, more free than the press that we have in the West. And we learn more from them than we learn from the Western media. Their press is better. They don't talk about genocide, of course, but they're giving us a lot of information that nobody else gives us. We start with Israeli media, most of us that do international news now. And another thing is, we are not looking at all at what we call Global South. I'm saying what we call because Ireland is like in the north, but it's a part of this movement of the Global South. There were millions of people in Indonesia in the streets. Nobody in the West talked about it. A few thousands in London are news. The millions in Indonesia for Gaza are not. And this is a problem of colonialism. Still, we still have this problem. And there's a very heavy price to pay for Israel too. We have to say that. One of my heroes is Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon, I hope you all know it. If you don't know him, Google him. And his book, Wretched of the Earth, which is kind of the opposite of what colonialism is. There was this event in the Knesset last week where soldiers of the IDF went there to talk about their trauma and their problems. There were many, many suicides. They throw pills to the MPs of the Knesset because they're living with drugs, all those that still live. There are 20,000 soldiers of the last 2 years that are having psychological or mental problems, serious problems. And as Limor Luria said, she's the head of the Defense Ministry's Rehabilitation Division, they're expecting another 20,000 in the next years, 2 years. This is 40,000 people who commit genocide and have to face the traumatic stress, the post-traumatic stress. I mentioned Fanon because Fanon had this luck, it was luck for us because the book was born, to be in Algeria in the years of the revolution and take care of both of the torturers and of the tortured, and see how the trauma is created in both of them and how they pay the consequences, both of them. It is very important to understand that this, what Israel does right now, is done to its own people too. What Nazi Germany had to face after Germany had to face after the Nazis is something that Israel will have to face in the near future, I think. Still, there are voices in Israel that we have to hear too, as there are Jewish voices for peace all over the world. And they're very important as the Palestinian voices are. Forgive me for my English, it's not my first language. So I may do some mistakes, especially when I'm moving like now. So we're in front of a very important problem. As Erin said, we are facing the same situation that the Jews faced in the Second World War. Smaller scale, but still a genocide, and a high-tech genocide. We must be ready to see what we can do and how we will face tomorrow the Israeli society, the Zionists, and the Jews who are not Zionists. And because there will be a time that they will have to pay. And the trauma that is experienced by all of them in both sides is now obvious. If this continues, as the minister said, Israeli minister said, until 2028, they talked about 2028, they will destroy their country, they will destroy any legacy that they ever had, and it will not only be the fascist government of Netanyahu. This is a very difficult situation created by this fascist government, and I'm gonna call them fascist, for all the Jews all over the world. Anti-Semitism is going to rise. That's why I'm talking about the trauma. And we have to be careful, very careful with that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamprini. The way you started your talk by bringing the example of a 12-year-old journalist is really, really moving, because even, small kids have their phones and they report and record what's happening. Personally, I'm thinking about, even if, and hopefully the genocide will stop, what are we going to do with all the trauma in those kids' hearts? This is the real trauma. I don't think how they're going to be able to overcome that when they sleep for 2 years in a row every night with bombardments. This is going to be very, very difficult. And how many kids have lost one or both parents? They're orphans. How many kids have lost their limbs? And how many kids are not be able to see, to walk? This is, we're talking about a broken new generation, totally broken. So I don't know how we're going to deal with all that. Yes, they're not numbers, of course, although Abubaker spoke about the staggering numbers, like 300 generals dead. That never happened in the First World War and Second World War, a Vietnam War together, put together.
I have
It's
to
the
add this,
first.
according to Brown University, who has this wonderful site about the cost of war, the war in Gaza killed more journalists than combined the US Civil War, World Wars I and II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War with Cambodia and Laos included, the wars in Yugoslavia, both of them, and the war in Afghanistan. All of those wars had less dead journalists than the dead journalists we have now.
The same with the doctors as well, of course, same. And this horrific impunity that nobody really takes any blame. There is no any consequences to anyone for these crimes. We live in the era of major impunity. Yes, we have many people also having their families targeted, many journalists having their families targeted. There's not just the victims, there are also their families. There are people that know journalists that they get targeted as well. Even if you wear the vest saying press, you become a possible target. So yes, this is a modern genocide, as Richard calls it. And this, your mention about the Global South is very interesting. Yeah, let's say that in London, there's people, gathering in the center and South Free Palestine. If you have this amount in the Global South, or even bigger, or, hundreds of thousands of people, they say, we saw them in Japan, we saw them in Indonesia, they're everywhere. We don't hear about them. This is another form of sort of silencing, or maybe, when it comes to poor countries like Indonesia, to racism, their voices are not heard. We need, all of us, we need to bear witness. And it's true that we know that since the October the 7th, that Israel does not care about its own people. The government of Hamas had said, we can give you the hostages. Israel didn't want. Israel used Hannibal Directive against its own people. So they always use this excuse, but they really do not care. They do not care about these people throwing the pills in the Knesset. Their psychological, who is going to care about these people's psychological traumas? So this fascist, as you said, and I would even call it Nazi government, doesn't seem to care about these people. And the rise of anti-Semitism, it's unfortunately natural that it's going to rise. So us, from our point of view, we have to raise our voices together with the Jewish people all around the world and be able to say the truth and show the truth to everyone. Of course, there are new evidence that it's not just 70,000 people. It's more than 630,000 people dead. But as we said, these are no numbers. And since Gaza Biennale, this amazing effort of Gazan artists and curators that spread like seeds in 12 countries around the world, and we had the opening in the Athens Pavilion yesterday, the artists from Gaza spoke to us via Zoom, not many, only 5 from our 27 artists that we host. Some of them were in the center of the line of fire. They didn't have internet, who don't know if they're alive right now. And they said that we are not numbers, we are people. As a curator, talking to these artists, I speak to them the way I speak to the Greek artists, to British artists, to all the artists that have communicated. They're powerful, beautiful, resilient beings, and they make a different type of art, an art that is being made in the most horrific of circumstances and talks about survival, about life. So I believe that the genocide is going to stop soon, but we have to, in some way or another, help all these people that suffered in these terrible terrible war. And I thank you very much for being here, for your powerful talks, each one from its own sort of guard, let's say, from cinema, from journalism, from documentaries, from the universities. We're powerful when we're many, as we say in Greece and everywhere else. I'm not sure if we have any questions from our Q&A from our audience. I don't see any questions, but I suppose we can receive questions even after our meeting, so we can have time to answer after we close our conference. I don't know if any of you would like to add something to our discussion, this very powerful discussion that hopefully we're all going to disseminate to our circles.
Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead. Oh, I just wanted to say about the high-tech nature, pick up on that Lamprini is not all genocides are high-tech. The one that Faye mentioned, that my own family on my father's side are Greek. They came from Turkey. They fled what's known, because it was the largest ethnic group, the Armenian genocide, when they came to the United States. And that was as was the genocide in Rwanda, for the most part, low-tech affairs. And, I think if you take time to read people like Primo Levi, I think this is one reason why the universities have been shut down, and you can't take the time to read carefully the writings of Hannah Arendt and Primo Levi and think about what's going on today. Because if you do, it moves you to action. The way that Primo Levi talks about the use of starvation, of high technology. The Holocaust was a high-tech a genocide. That's one of the things that's very clear about it. And what is being done in Gaza today, there is a low-tech, the use of starvation, but also a very high technology with American involvement, American companies being involved. Again, this high tech thing just brings up for me, again, a specific way in which history here is repeating itself. Not exactly, and I think it's very important to point this out. There's nothing identical, and that would be wrong, but there are really significant areas to be thought about in terms of how they connect, and which it's not by chance are being forbidden for us to think about, and again, which are, I think, really can motivate us to see why what's happening now is not something that we can sit back and be passive about.
Yes, of course. And also, the high-tech situation refers also to the platforms that Lamprini said, that unfortunately the platforms using this high-tech technology to silence us, to silence everybody that speaks. I'm talking about, of course, the Zionist platforms, the big ones. That we have to fight technology as well. We have to find other platforms and other ways, but there's always, as you said, Richard, other ways and inventiveness into speaking the truth.
Yes.
We have questions.
And I see two questions by an attendee. One question is for Lamprini. Lamprini, you mentioned using information from Israeli journalists. How unbiased have you found them to be? Is there any balance in their reports?
Well, if we're talking about Gideon Levy, depends on the journalist, but there's still some voices like him who are very important and heroic. He once described how he was walking in the streets and a woman went and spit on him and called him traitor. That's his everyday life, you know. But on the other hand, when I talk about, it's not that they are unbiased, they're almost all pro-genocide. But on the other hand, they're talking the truth. Like when we learn just an example, after Iran bombarded Tel Aviv, they didn't allow journalists to go anywhere, and they said that no, we're not letting images come out of what happened. And then we had in the Israeli newspapers news about 30,000 houses that needed reconstruction or to be, I don't know the word, to fix them, So you see that we have 30,000 houses who had damages. So you learn stuff from them. You can find things from them. And it's important that they're telling the whole story from the Israel side too. They allow you to see what every minister says. It's important for us to know how they see it, because this is a coalition government and you can see where it goes. So it depends, but it's not that they're balanced, but they're telling truths. That's the thing.
Yeah, and if I can say something about that too, I think definitely in terms of the mainstream in Israel, the great majority, 77%, the high 70s% of Israelis seem to not care about the plight of people in Gaza. So an overwhelming majority are okay with what's happening in Gaza, which is horrific. At the same time, there is obviously an important Israeli left, as Lamprini said, with Gideon Levy and many others. Haaretz, again, does an okay job. Sometimes their reporters are incredibly honest and incredibly forthright, and I've read Haaretz for most of my life, where at the same time they do many times kind of, platform centrists or right-wing people who are pro-genocide. There luckily is a growing kind of independent left-wing media landscape in Israel with like 972 magazine and Lead Locally and 972 magazine and other publications. Obviously, we have folks like Yuval Abraham, who's one of the directors of No Other Land. And people like that have been calling it a genocide for a very long time, which is great. So even though they are very small, it's important that they're there. And just like in the fight against apartheid in South Africa, the number of white South Africans that were anti-apartheid was very small, but it was important to build and foster that community. So when the apartheid ended, there were white South African partners that the pro-democracy camp could work with. And I do hope that, when we see apartheid end in Israel, Palestine, there is a core but small left-wing group of Israelis who can be part of that transition towards equal rights. I don't know if that'll actually happen, but it is important, I think, to help foster and give them support because, it's hard for American Jews and Americans in general fighting this genocide. For people like Yuval Abraham and other, it's much, much harder. They frequently get death threats. I interviewed Avner Kavariyahu, the former head of Breaking the Silence, in 2017. And when we interviewed him, he said that just like a week before, police had stopped someone who was going to their offices with a canister of gasoline to just burn their office down. And that was just a normal thing that he had to deal with, significant death threats and threats on both his life and the lives of many in their organization. So while it is true that the overwhelming majority of Israeli society either doesn't care about what's happening in Gaza or supportive of it, I'm incredibly grateful that there is a small cohort of Israelis. And actually, my transformation really began actually by reading left-wing Israelis. I luckily had a teacher in high school who just gave me a bunch of books on Palestine, and a lot of them were by left-wing Israeli historians. And it was especially reading these left-wing Israeli historians that spoke openly about the Nakba and the occupation, not as anti-Israel propaganda, but as real facts in Israeli history, just like the colonization of the Americas and, chattel slavery are a real part of American history, not anti-American propaganda. That really opened my eyes. So even though it's incredibly hard to be a left-wing Israeli, and it always has been, I'm incredibly grateful that there have been those that have fought against the grain the entire time to try to look at Israeli history just like we look at American history. So it's a very tough place to be in, but I am grateful for those voices. Obviously, in addition to the Palestinian voices that from the very beginning have been advocating for Palestinian freedom and humanity.
Erin, you gave me an idea. I'm going to give to Abubaker the Bang Bang Club, the book, because those were the white journalists who did the fight, the good fight in South Africa.
Yeah. Totally. And they were very important. Those white South Africans. Again, I know Andrew Feinstein, who was, I believe, the first white South African member of the ANC in Parliament, and seeing what he went through and seeing what he did is incredibly inspiring, and I think can be an inspiration for left-wing Israelis and also for white Americans who are battling fascism in the U.S. too.
And there's also some strong voices in Instagram as well, like the Audrey and other people that they have a big following. So yes, indeed, there are people like that. Richard would like to answer this question as well.
Your microphone, Richard.
Microphone, Richard.
If we have another question, we can go
Okay.
on.
Okay. There is a question for Jack. You started by saying it's hard to find the words to meet the moment. What can we say when talking to those living in Gaza right now? It's so hard to find the words, Jack.
Sure. My first instinct for this question is to ask, what do you need? And obviously, the challenge for me is that I think Americans are in a position where we are responsible for a great deal of the genocide. It's our tax dollars, it's our government, and yet we are removed from the day-to-day. That's part of why it's hard to find the words, that I cannot imagine precisely what it feels like to live in Gaza over the past 2 months, or live under the apartheid system that precedes and enables the genocide. I can imagine things that I think might be like that. I think often about, during the rise of Nazism in Germany and Europe, there were Jews who tried to flee, and then there were Jews who said, "This is my home, I'm not leaving." And I think about the courage that decision took, and I think about the price that many of those families paid with their lives for saying that I will not be scared or intimidated out of my home. At the same time as I obviously, I have close family friends who are, people who fled, or their children. So I see both sides of that. So that's like my point of reference. But the question for me is, there are parallels, but this is obviously also in important ways a different kind of genocide. It's a different trauma, it's a different situation. And so I think what's important for me is to bear witness to the differences while also acknowledging the fact that, there is something that links, or that should link, human beings. There is a common humanity which should link us, and that we can bear witness to that too. And so, it's kind of a roundabout way of saying, I think that one of the most important things is to ask questions and to give space for people in Gaza to speak for themselves, which I think is what, American media or the campaign to silence speech at universities, like so often what it is attempting to do is to preclude make sure that people from Gaza cannot speak for themselves, that their voices are not heard. And I think that one of our jobs, especially in like the knowledge production part of American society, is to broaden the conversation and bring in new voices. At the same time, I really want to lift up the point from Erin and Lamprini about the Israeli left, the Jewish left, the American left. I think, the call to make space for people from Gaza to speak for themselves is not a call for Americans or Jewish people or Israelis to be silent or defer. We also have really important voices. And, as Richards has also said, it would be good for not Jewish people to speak up against anti-Semitism. It's really important for Americans, for Jewish people, for Israelis to speak up for Palestinian lives. But if I'm talking to somebody from Gaza, I think that's a moment where I want to create some space, because I don't think those voices always get the chance to, say what it is, how it feels, what you're going through, how we can support. So I think I would lead with the question and see where a conversation might take us.
I wanted to add something about the American role in this, and make a plug for my film V13 at the same time, which is we filmed V13 in New York. We used New York to represent Vienna before the First World War and to show the rise of fascism. And the United States has a very troubling link between both the Holocaust and also in Gaza today. In Hitler's Mein Kampf, he talked he had very complimentary things to say about the U.S. immigration policies. He said, the Americans are very good at keeping white supremacy, and I'm paraphrasing, and we can really learn from them. And when Hitler came to power, you can find this in a book by James Q. Whitman called Hitler's American Model. And they were looking for precedents for laws they could pass to remove from Jewish German citizens their rights, what Hannah Arendt called the first right, which is the right to have rights. And where they found models, where they looked, was in the United States, in the Jim Crow laws. And when Ta-Nehisi Coates recently, as he talks about in his book, The Message, goes to Israel, visits the West Bank, and sees how the Palestinians are treated, the first thing that comes to his mind is Jim Crow. So we have this American connection, this American constructed ideology, which has been recently really reawakened in the United States. The first film, the first movie, feature film ever shown in the White House was Birth of a Nation, about the creation of the Ku Klux Klan, the white supremacist group responsible for numerous lynchings. And President Trump's father was arrested in a protest in Queens for taking part in a Ku Klux Klan rally. So, I think we're living through a time in the United States where you see a very compatible ideology dominant, which again makes it receptive to supporting what Israel is doing, but which is far from what American people want. I think if you have crumbling support for what Israel is doing, but it really needs to manifest itself. We really need to have more voices speaking out, and that's very important. That people speak up and they get to realize that their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, share the same sense of opposition to letting this go on, and claiming what never again really means.
Have you seen the interview of Leonard Peltier to Democracy Now! Richard?
No.
He made a connection. I don't know if anyone else saw it. It's wonderful. You must see it. He made a connection between the situation now in the United States and in Palestine from the perspective of a native person. He says, we are not safe today here. See what's happening in our streets with us. And see what is happening in Palestine. He saw it as the same thing, that the politics right now against all minorities in the United States are connected with what is happening in Palestine. And from his mouth was, I think, very important.
Yes, one of the things is in France during the Algerian resistance movement, at a certain point, France brings back into the main country counterinsurgency techniques. And this increases exponentially the violence within France. And you can see with military units being placed in American cities, that the counterinsurgency techniques, that this is a spreading of a war mentality, and the look and the seeking out for a kind of Bay of Tonkin or burning of the Reichstag kind of justification for the use to clamp down on American democracy as people become more aware of their shared opposition among people who supported Trump. I mean, this is not, as we know, there was a key support for Bernie Sanders that shifted, that felt left out from the Democratic Party when it shut out Bernie Sanders the first time Trump ran. So the shifting grounds here makes the use of these counterinsurgency techniques, which have many roots, including technological roots, surveillance roots in Israel and the genocide. So this is very relevant. This is not something that's happening over there. This is very much very relevant to our lives today and tomorrow in the United States.
Exactly. It's not something that's happening somewhere far away. Well, from Greece, of course, we're very close geographically as well, and we see what's happening also with the American bases and the British bases in Cyprus and how they use the area to continually bring aircrafts to carry weapons and everything. But what if we leave this thing without bringing out the truth? This thing is going to happen to other places of the world, the impunity, as we were talking about, as Abubaker said. So it's not just Palestine. It's about everything, everybody. It's about all of us.
Yes.
So if we don't have any more questions, I hope all this discussion is recorded so we can have it in our social media. We can post it, and for people that they didn't make it, because some people try to enter, but the time, how we say, they couldn't get after a certain period of time into our discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much, Jack. Keep doing the good work you're doing in the campuses. Thank you very much, Erin, with your wonderful cinematographic work, and Lamprini as an independent journalist that fights for the truth. And we really, we need more of you. We need journalists like that. Thank you very much, our audience, Thrasivoulos. Thank you very much for the good words.
And we have to thank Faye, who took care of this meeting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Faye. And also your name, you have the same name with this wonderful girl that created our logo. We have to thank her too, which is Ευτυχία Tzanetoulakou.
Ευτυχία. I'm Ευτυχία as well. That's Faye's my artistic name. So thank you, all of you, and thank the organization. We thank Press Project, and of course the conference and the organizers and the people behind the scenes to make this happen. So we hope for a next meeting in the near future, maybe a meeting that would celebrate ceasefire, that would celebrate some sort of solution that will take place, a solution that will make people happy, everybody happy, and this is what we all strive for. Let's hope for the boats that travel to Rafah, a safe journey, and to all the different types of actions, the actions that maybe sometimes can be more energetic, like the Palestine action. I'm in Greece, I'm allowed to say that. If I was in Britain, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't be able to say that, but we need actions like that. So thank you, all of you, and hope we meet again in the near future with good news.